welcome. My name is Theresa Byrne, and I want to honor and acknowledge Ellen and Angelique for not just their commitment for themselves and their lives, but the commitment that they have for other people to raise the consciousness of the planet, to help others find that true source of love and divinity and their higher self and that sage within them. And that's really what brought us to this conversation that we're having today. I'm an inner power coach. I have been a power coach for the last 25 years, and recently started training with a gentleman named Shirzad Chamine, who created a system that took all of my work on power and put it into an easy to understand, simplified way of understanding the archetypes. Are you doing, is your mind your best friend, or is it not helping you? Like, is it your enemy or is it your friend? And are you serving yourself or are you fighting yourself? Are you sabotaging your good work in the world, or are you helping it to create more good work in the world? And it's really that simple. And both Shirzad and I believe that finding the simplicity can help direct you, because our minds get overwhelmed with information, parts, pieces, details. And so really this presentation is about how to simplify your thinking. And in relationships, are you sabotaging those bad boys, or are you opening your heart and allowing yourself to connect and love and find the truth of who others are and express the truth of who you are? And in relation. Oh, there I am in the background too.
Yeah, I need to share it on some pages, sorry.
Okay, got it.
Thank you for the introduction. And yeah, so we really wanted to talk about this specific area, which is love and relationships, because I think the way that we sabotage love and relationships is just so much more apparent and so much more, has so much more, long-term ramifications, because you can always blame other people, and that's what actually happens as well in relationships. Whereas I think if you go into other areas, you can always hide, like in business, you can always hide. You can say, oh, it was the culture, it was this and that. Whereas
My boss, the economy.
Yeah. So whereas I think if you look into love and relationships, you can clearly see that, that it doesn't matter really which relationship you go into, you probably end up dating either yourself with the same person in the same dynamic, just with different names attached to it. And so unless we start to see what we're doing, I think love and relationships the saboteurs can be so revealing when you actually do the test accurately. And I want to say to people, when you do the test, positiveintelligence.com/assessments, I would say if you fill it in normally with like the normal you probably get a really good indication of how you are in the normal areas of your life, like work and friendships, etc. Whereas if you're gonna fill it in really, really with the back in mind, I really want to know how I'm reacting from the survivor brain in love, I think you'll get a very different test. So if you haven't done the test yet in that way, just be very honest about thinking about your relationships, actually what showed up and what can you actually learn from your own patterns. So yeah, so Theresa, you're also going to be creating a pod with us for 7 weeks, where we're going to really run through the whole program and actually retrain our brain to go from survivor to actually the superpowers of the sage brain, which are really, as I also already realized, the superpowers of the sage brain are actually very underutilized, mostly when we are in stressful relationships or when it matters, when we have those conflicts, when things are not going well. That is when the survivor brain takes over, and we are actually not even having access to the sage brain. So please take us through your presentation. If you have something to share, please do that.
Yeah, first, what is a pod, Theresa? What is a pod?
Oh,
we
yeah,
have a pod,
sorry.
but what is it? What is it? What's a pod?
What the heck is a pod? A pod is a group of people who are committed, downright committed and gonna do it. They are gonna learn how to not just access that positive part of their brain, but use it every day. So we can learn all we want. We can take in all the details, information, all the science, anything you want. It does not matter unless you start practicing it. So our pod group is a group that is going to practice what we're preaching. And it's important that you understand this. Pod is really, you're going to go through the program individually. You're going to use an app. You're going to watch videos. And then once a week, we meet as a pod to go over what we've learned. What have I seen about myself? How am I applying this? How is this showing up? And how can I move from that part of my brain that is not helping me, saboteur, to the part of my brain that has my back, that is my sage. So that's what a pod is. Any other questions about that, Ellen? I love your question.
Yeah, about the size. So how big is the pod?
Typically, pod size will be anywhere from 5 to 12 members. We can also do a larger group meeting. Pod meetings are very short. I don't want anybody to think, oh my gosh, I don't have time for this. Pod meetings are short. We get a chance to discuss. Nobody gets to hide. You get to share what's going on for you. Nobody takes over. So it's not one person's view of everything. It is what's happening for you. It's very individualized. And then from that, we can also have other meetings, or Angelique really likes to get in depth with this stuff. That is not everybody's brain. I want to acknowledge that Angelique has a unique brain where she likes to dive deep, deep, deep. Not everybody wants that. And so there's room for everyone to have their own experience. If we want to do deep dives, we can. If you're more of an overview and you want to see how it applies to you and what's coming up, that's fine too. So the pod is really all about practicing and the group. What happens in groups, studies have shown when you're working in a group with others, you increase your results. How much, Ellen?
500.
500%. Your results differ. So unless you're just sitting there watching something, reading something, then you're experiencing it, that starts to grow. And then you add involvement, you add group, you add people getting your back and in your face and with you, 500%.
And how do we keep, so we want to practice. So it's all about practice. How much practice are we going to do during the days? And how are we going to be able to remember this, to do it?
And that is exactly what, when we opened this up, we talked about simplicity. And here's why. Simplicity is what our brains remember. Going in depth on every saboteur and how they deal with love today, y'all are going to remember like 2 points. I'm not even kidding. But we'll cover different points so everybody gets to understand a little bit about their saboteur and love. But what our brains like is simplicity. So here's what you do. On the app, you're going to be guided 3 times a day to just check into your body. And we do something very simple called a PQ rep, and it's your positive quotient, your positivity quotient. And through many, many years of research, this is the most effective PQ rep. And doing this 3 times a day just helps you get back into that happy part of your brain, the curiosity, the engaged part. And that practice, you'll be cued 3 times a day on the app. You'll watch a weekly video, and then we're going to check in weekly with your pod group as well. And you're going to learn all these different apps. You're going to learn how to do this with your touch. These are the touch. Ellen and I both really like the tactile ones, the touch ones. There's a way of doing it using hearing. There's a way of checking in. And for those of you who've studied mindfulness or spirituality, it is really like turbo zapping, technical word, turbo zapping your mindfulness to the next level. Because instead of being mindful whenever you feel like it, it's like you almost create a pathway to mindfulness automatically because you're being guided to 3 times a day.
I've been trying it, and I can sense whenever I have I'm like, oh, this could be a saboteur. I just go like this. I'm like, oh, it doesn't really matter. It's like the first thing that comes to mind. Doesn't really matter. Whatever was in my brain, yeah.
Right? And it's funny
Really
because some people think they have to define and figure out which saboteur is activated or triggered. No. All you have to know is you feel crappy, you don't feel good, you feel scared, nervous, anxious, fearful, and that is not your natural state.
Really doesn't matter. Just shift it. Okay.
It's all true. That wise part of ourselves is really created to help guide us through life.
But I think
Just
most
forgot.
people don't even know that actually when you're in stress, when you're feeling worried, when you're feeling anxious, when you start to overanalyze and you start to run these catastrophic, your worst case scenarios, that you are definitely running the wrong part of the brain that is just there to help you survive, but not to help you find solutions, to help you create, new innovation, or actually help you heal your body, or even, think clearly about a situation when it really matters. And I think this is why this specific science is so extremely interesting, because it was the first time for me that I realized that every time I feel stressed out, it is my survivor brain, and there's actually absolutely no reason to listen to the survivor brain unless we have to run out because there's a fire or a lion chasing us, right? And so I think this is so this was life-changing to me. So some of you will, for you, it will be new as well, that you think, wow, I didn't know that my saboteur, my survivor brain was actually running so much of my life. And as I said to, and Theresa said this, but I found out as well when I started reading the book, that once you identify the way the saboteur talks to you, the way the saboteur is running in your life, you actually find out, to your shock, that it's probably there 99% of the time talking to you, talking at you, giving you explanations, and telling you what you should be worried about or how you should be judging yourself or a situation, never ever coming up with solutions. And it's just, and all your life you've been listening to it and identifying with it. It is really shocking. And this is why we said, well, we really need to know more about this. And if we can serve people by just, interviewing you and talking about the book and talking about the course and talking about a complete different app that we don't even get money for, we're more than happy to do that, because this is going to be a life changer, I think, for people who really are interested. Theresa, how are we going to start with, I think we had an outline which was like, what gets triggered, how do we know, and then what responds, so and so that people actually understand their patterns first, and then maybe something else that you could come up with.
So let's do this. I'm going to share. Can you see my screen?
Yes.
Okay. So let's talk about the 10 saboteur triggers and how they affect us in our daily life. Let me go to one of my favorites. When you deal with think of it this way, your brain has two sides. And in what Angelique called the saboteur brain is your survival. That is all about fight, flight, or freeze, getting safe, being okay, having what you need. And it is really based on survival and fear. I have to tell you, if you've ever met someone who is extremely anxious or incredibly nervous, this is usually where they're coming from. They're rocking that saboteur, that side of their brain. And it's typically the left side of the brain. It's not all of the left. But in the sage part of your brain, and in the book, Shirzad talks mainly about he talks a little bit about it, but the book came out in 2012, and we've gone through so many different pieces since then, iterations. But the sage part of your brain is the middle prefrontal cortex. It's tapped in to your empathy parts of your right brain. It's all about you thriving and rocking and loving your life and connecting, and it's creative solutions. So oftentimes you'll hear people talk about, oh, I'm motivated though. I'm motivated through fear and I get things done. Well, yeah, in that short term. And if you're in a relationship, maybe the part of you that's activated is telling you that you have to be very safe. So what you look for are all the things that are unsafe every time you go on a date, every time you meet a new person. You look for all of the ways they could be dangerous to you. That doesn't feel good, and that's not motivating. Whereas the sage part of you, which is who we really are, and the saboteurs are characters. You are not your saboteurs. You are not one thing. You are not just that thing. But the sage part of all of us helps motivate us through love, empathy, curiosity, all of the things that you can see here. And that's really one of the important pieces. So there are 10 different sages. We'll go to this slide. 10 different saboteurs. You might recognize yourself. My favorite thing when I pull out this slide or I talk about it is, oh, controller, that's my mom. Or hyperachiever, that's my ex-husband. Or restless. We always recognize these pieces in other people. but can we recognize them in ourselves? So we all might have a piece of the controller saboteur in us. We all might have a little hyperachiever. We all might have a little restless or stickler, pleaser. Hypervigilant is wanting to know that everything is safe all the time. The avoider, I love this picture. If you can see that, Ellen, he's got a bag over his head. I will not deal. The ostrich. The victim, another saboteur we've heard of a lot. And the hyper-rational, which is very tied into the left part of our brain and wants to make sure that we have all the facts, the figures, the information, the data. And that's important to a degree. It's not important to every degree. It's important to a degree. And I'm also going to talk to you about the master saboteur. And this is the universal saboteur. And it is called the judge. And the judge has 3 characteristics. Let me see if I can pull up. So when you hear the words the judge, how many of you have heard of the inner critic?
Yeah.
Yes, right? Very common. Well, what if I were to tell you that not only is the inner critic, that's one piece of the judge. The other piece of the judge is you start to judge others or circumstances. So the judge is really the major universal saboteur, and it is truly, for most of us, it's in every single culture. We all have it to different degrees. And so for you, you get to decide, how active is my judge? So let's talk about the judge first. Let me open that. And again, when these guys get activated, it's typically because you're in fear. Something happened. And let's talk about fear in a relationship for a second. What are we most afraid of in relationships? Angelique, what are you most afraid of in a relationship?
That I'm betrayed.
Betrayal.
Yeah.
Awesome. Anyone else? What are you most afraid of in a relationship? For most people, it is that they aren't lovable. There's something about them that's not lovable or not good enough. And that is absolutely the judge. Ellen, most thing you're most afraid of in a relationship?
I think it's that one, because I was like, something like about me being, afraid that I make mistakes. So that must be that, yeah.
Afraid of yourself making a mistake. So really, when we're looking for love in a relationship, we're looking for connection. We want to connect our hearts to another human being. And then all of a sudden, when we get nervous or frightened or stressed in the relationship, all these different other players come in and they kind of mess with us. So I'm going to talk mostly about the judge right now, but the judge is probably the biggest one that shows up in all relationships. So the judge...
I have the feeling... Oh, sorry.
Oh, please.
I have the feeling lacking true intimacy is something that I miss in a relationship. It's not betrayal or my not being good enough, but a relationship that is superficial is nothing for me. I just don't think I like that. A true intimacy, it doesn't mean physical intimacy. Of course, the physical intimacy is there from the first day you start kissing and hugging, but the other kind of intimacy where you don't have to speak much, the other knows it. And this kind of intimacy, I think, is what I have missed in a relationship. Not anymore, but I have in my past. Yes, thank you.
Beautiful, and it's a worthwhile discussion. When you come to a position of being in a relationship, what comes up for you? So the judge is the part of us that finds a fault with others, self, and circumstances. And it causes much of our disappointment in ourselves and in others. And each time our judge is activated, another saboteur character will show up. So how the judge shows up for ourselves is we badger ourselves for past mistakes or current shortcomings. A lot of women, when we date, will judge ourselves based on how we look, what size we are, or what age we are. Those are all judgment characteristics. Or, as Ellen so eloquently said, mistakes. Like having the idea that, oh my gosh, I've screwed up before, I don't want to bring that to a relationship. And that is how our judge shows up for ourselves. We start judging ourselves as not being enough or not being good enough. Our judge can also show up by focusing on others. So it's, what's wrong with this person? How they said that? Who the heck does that? What did they mean by that? So it's that someone's not saying or doing the right things. And what does that cause? That causes us to pull back and close up our heart. And that can look like they're not texting enough, they're not communicating enough, they're saying the wrong things. It's all about rightness and wrongness. And it is also that, and I don't know about you, but a lot of times if you've got a group of friends, they'll always agree that something was someone else's fault. Oh, how dare they? I can't believe he said that. Or what? No way. That's toxic. She crazy, whatever. Right? Like we start to judge each other based on what someone else has done or hasn't done. And then the last piece of judgment, which you will only hear in this work, is really a judgment of circumstances. And a circumstance is, I'll be happy when. If you're in a relationship, I'll be happy when they say I love you. I'll be happy when he or she, fill in the blank for what you think will make you happy. All that means is you're putting your happiness in a relationship outside. When someone does something else, then you'll be happy. Instead of, how can I be happy and satisfied and fulfilled right now and share that with the rest of the world? So I am curious, is this resonating for any of you? Are you aware of the judgment of yourself or of others?
I mean, when we played the appreciation game, judgment sounds like the devaluation, and it was always about self, others, and circumstances, because nobody is exempt from the devaluation that's going on in our mind all the time, and always seeing the negative, or always, judging something as this is not good. And of course, then that's what it sort of becomes like a self-fulfilling prophecy. And whereas we have a part of the brain that's very wise, or a part of our being that's very wise, that can actually see a whole different meaning and a much bigger picture than what we think should not have been like this, or it has, those other parts of the brain have empathy, are more intuitive, have almost foresight sometimes. And that's what we miss out on when we let this judge talk to us, and we don't even recognize that it doesn't have to be this way. Yeah.
And I'm going to share again. I'm going to be really honest with you. In one of the relationships I was in, I was dating an anchorman, and our dates would start late at night. So here in the US, if you're on the news, you're done at 10:30 p.m. And then our date would start at 10:45 p.m., which was really late for me. I'm not a night owl. And I had a complete judgment about the fact that to unwind, he would take a couple of fingers of scotch or whatever dark other liquid. And I think he drank too much. I felt totally judgy about that. It's 11 o'clock at night and you're drinking until 2 o'clock in the morning. That is an inappropriate lifestyle. I had so much judgment about that. Now, if I were to honor myself and have a conversation with that, we could have connected. We could have had a discussion about it. I could have explained how much I need health, and how important taking care of one's body as one's temple is to me. And that didn't feel right. But instead, I was so judgy, it wasn't even funny. So let me share this next screen. So the impact of the judge on ourselves and others, it is the master saboteur and causes so much of our anxiety, our distress, and our suffering. And if any of you know who Buddha is.
Who's that?
Right? Buddha. I don't know. He was a prince or something, and he decided he wanted to check out like what really is enlightenment. So he left the castle grounds. Anyway, so pain happens. It can be a part of life. Suffering is optional. The judge is optional suffering. And it is also the cause of much of the conflict that we end up with in relationship. And the judge, as Angelique said in the appreciation game, it's when you look at things through the lens of good and bad. right and wrong. It's a very black and white concept. And that is where we struggle with each other when we decide we have the right answer. We have the key. And the way that they're doing it is wrong. You are drinking too much. And there's nothing wrong with saying, hey, this to me seems unhealthy and but I didn't do that. I just judged him. That was me. That was my judginess coming out. Anyone else ever found themselves judging others and noticed where it's had an impact on their relationships?
Yes.
And
I'm
thank you
old
for your
enough for
honesty.
that. I'm old enough that I can tell you I've done that over and over again. I've been married 3 times. This is my 3rd marriage. So I've judged a lot. Thank God it stopped. But even today I noticed that I don't judge my husband, but other people. And I had to just remind it again. It was very good. It was a great insight today to find out why this judgment that lead to this judgment. I don't know whether we have time for that, so I won't take your time, dear.
Oh, and I appreciate that. Angelique, did you want to say anything else about the judge before we move on?
I just want to invite people to actually really be aware of actually the next few days when you walk around, whether you actually suddenly feel that you're tense or that you're not feeling well. It's very often when you then look at what is going on in your mind, it's some kind of thought form or belief system that is coming from the value system of the judge, because the judge is really there to protect you. You know, it's judging you to protect you, it's judging others to protect you, and it's judging the world to protect you. But is it coming up with solutions? Is it coming up with innovative thinking? Is it coming up with like wisdom or, you know, high levels of consciousness? It's not. No.
But today's judgment was due to when I went through it all, I found out I ended up at achieving, that I am an achiever, and when I cannot achieve or to achieve, I compete. And when I'm competing, I am very jealous of the person who is better than me, and this jealousy makes me then become prejudiced about somebody, and this prejudice leads me to judgment. This is what I found out today, like a string of beads, you know. So, I mean, it was fantastic to realize achievement is nothing bad, even to compete is nothing bad, but it's the attitude and when you're going to use these attitudes that one has within oneself, you see. So when I realized I was judging somebody I don't even know, I've never seen her, but just reading a story and saying, these all bloody bullshit. Oh, excuse me. Bullshit. I thought, good gracious, you know, what the heck am I doing here? Why am I judging this person? And I just reflected and I said, why am I judging? Where is this coming from? And then I realized, oh, I'm prejudiced. But why am I oh, I'm jealous of her. Oh, what the heck? Why am I jealous? Because I'm competing with her. Then it just took this thread of beads, you know, and it was done, but it was good for me, as you say, Angelique, to reflect on what we are doing when we are judging. Where the hell it comes from? Where are the roots leading you to? Thank you. I won't take your time, Theresa.
And I think just love and relationships, we're talking about the most intimate relationships, but think about relationships in the world scene. How did we create all of this mess here? It's really, you know, if I think really, if we could all of us could collectively cultivate more of the sage brain, we would be much more, you know, emotionally intelligent or have more positive intelligence in how we actually have self-awareness, but also how we then conduct you know, negotiating things like, you know, political solutions, economic solutions, you know, things like distribution of wealth or food across the globe, things like that. They are all basically if you look at the economic structures, you know, this is actually what Greg Braden says. A lot of it is based on things like competition and on survivor, you know, the survival of the fittest. It's about whoever is more listening to the judge or the saboteur or the survivor brain, they are going to win in our economic systems right now. So it's really, it goes very, very far. But let's stick to love and relationships because we have enough suffering there.
And I also want to reiterate that the original survival function of the judge is that negative neural bias toward what might be dangerous, what might be negative, what so we don't love being surprised in a bad way. So the judge helps us, its thought process is that it helps us from being surprised, taken advantage of, connecting with the wrong people, judging the circumstances so we're not disappointed. So the judge has a survival function in safety, but safety is such a limited perspective when you look at thriving, and as you said, Indrani, connecting and this bigger picture. Safety is one, it's like this one piece, it's like your base chakra. There's so many other pieces other than just safety, keeping us safe. And there are other ways to stay safe that don't allow you, that won't force you to disconnect. So let's go to the next saboteur, which is the avoider. And I have an avoider in the house. And so, what? Ellen is an avoider. And let me share this screen. So here's the description of the avoider. The avoider focuses on the positive. They are rainbows and unicorns. They are not going to look at difficulties. They are not going to be challenged. And also, they don't like to do hard things. They don't like unpleasant tasks. I'm not saying they won't do them. And a person with avoider tendencies, just if something looks difficult or hard, their natural inclination is, I'm going to go this way and do something more fun or more enjoyable. Now, how does that show up in a relationship? They avoid conflict. Ellen, do you mind speaking a little bit about how the avoider persona might have shown up in any of your relationships?
Yeah, just ignoring things and also not talking about things and then getting super angry on the inside, even though there's things to discuss, but just don't want to do it.
There's always a time and a place, right? But the avoider will not look for the time and the place.
There's always something else shiny going on over there. So I'll just go more and more that way. And it seems further away. And then it's like, never mind. I'll just forget about it.
And has that caused, do you feel like it's caused challenges for you?
Of course. Yeah, very much. Yeah. It's important to talk about things and to express your needs and stuff, and not, the other person doesn't know you're actually angry on the inside, but because you're not telling it, it's like, slightly insane.
And I have a client, I'll call Megan, who had a big avoider tendency. And when she didn't know how to ask for what she wanted in the first place. So she was a pleaser and an avoider, by the way.
Like me, yeah.
And so when she finally started asking for what she wanted, her partner would hyper-rationalize what she said she needed. She said, I need to go out to dinner. I need to feel special. I need to feel like a woman. I need to get dressed up. And he'd say, well, we just had dinner and we don't have time for that. And that's not gonna, and he would hyper-rationalize, and she let it go on for months before she came to me and she was like, okay, this doesn't feel right. Like, I feel like I'm having something that doesn't feel positive. I'm like, yeah, you're pissed. It's okay. But being able to ask for what you want and then being able to have it received and for the other person is a challenge. So let's talk about the avoider justifies itself by telling you what a good person you are. You're sparing the other person's feelings. Ellen, thank you for not bringing up conflict.
I'll just suffer in silence.
You're such a martyr. That's so noble. The justification lie is also for the avoider that it's important to be flexible. I need to keep the peace. I don't need to raise a ruckus. And if you've ever, all of you, I'm sure have studied the law of attraction. And if you've ever heard of spiritual bypass, it's where you put yourself away from a conflict or a difficulty without actually having to deal with whatever's happening. And that is a very avoidant. It's like the spiritual ostrich in the desert. No, everything's fine. Rainbows, kittens, unicorns. I'm not mad. I know I'm gritting my teeth, but I'm not mad. What's wrong? Nothing. So the avoider will force whoever's in a relationship to run away from conflict, unpleasant feelings, or having to deal. Yeah, right? So fight, flight, or freeze, you are fleeing, you are running away from anything that doesn't feel awesome. And any other questions about that or anything you want to add?
No, seems about right.
And I love avoiders because they're so easy to, they're so much fun. They love to focus on the fun. And I also want to say, every single one, and Indrani had been talking about this, every single one of the saboteur mindsets has a strength. The avoider likes peace. The avoider likes harmony. The avoider enjoys having things work. That is their jam. The problem, as Indrani so beautifully stated, was when they start to avoid something and it's not healthy anymore. It stops being a helpful part of them and it moves into sabotaging.
So every saboteur has a stage part of the saboteur.
Let me say that just different. Every saboteur has a strength that has gone awry.
Mm.
Okay.
The
Got it.
sage
That's
is
right.
who we are. Sage is just us. It's our essence. It's our light. It is who we are. But through life and circumstance, we might have taken on these different mindsets that are sabotaging because we think that's how to get what we want. An avoider thinks that she can get what she wants by avoiding conflict. An avoider thinks that he doesn't know how to bring up difficult conversations, so he withdraws and runs away and hides. So wanting peace and harmony is beautiful, right? But when it means that you run away when that's not present, that means you're running away from the relationship. You're disconnecting. So each of the saboteurs comes from a survival part of us that is healthy. Each of them have strengths that have just gone wacko, if that makes any sense. The technical term is wacko.
I love that term. We're the wackos, everyone.
Right?
Everyone has some wacko.
Sometimes, right? And even, let's see, what's the next one? The next one that we're going to talk about, and if you recognize yourself or other people, just don't tell them that you see them. The next one is the controller. And what I want to say about the controller, let me open the slides, is that there's nothing wrong with wanting things to be correct. There's nothing wrong with wanting things to be right. What happens is when we decide that creates disconnection. And show of hands, if you've ever known someone who tends to be very controlling, there's not a lot of room for you. They can take the air out of the room. Oh, sorry, Angelique, you are controlling? You have control?
Yeah. In the third position, but it shows up as a reaction when I'm triggered in the hypervigilance.
Excellent. And what a great realization. So the characteristics, strong energy, but a need to control and take charge. But the reason a controller believes that is because they think things will be chaotic if they don't. They can connect with others through competition, challenge, physicality, or conflict. So these might be people who are intelligent and they enjoy verbal and mental sparring as a way of connecting. It's not necessarily a bad thing. It's just that might not work for everyone. Characteristic also that they tend to be very blunt. They say what's on their mind, which is also not a negative thing if it's done out of kindness and diplomacy. Controllers can also sometimes push people they work with or friends out of their comfort zone. That doesn't have to be a bad thing, but if you don't want to get out of your comfort zone, you don't want to be bossed around by anybody. And oftentimes a controller is someone who comes alive in the face of a challenge. And I think, Indrani, you were talking about how you were looking at competition and achieving, and there are so many good ways to do that. There's so many ways to make that happen in a positive light. What happens when it starts to disconnect us from our source and others. When it starts to become isolating, That's when it's dangerous. Let's see. So the controller in a relationship thinks that things won't get done if you don't do them. Is very pushy, is bossy. If I don't control, I will be controlled. And I can't live with that. So they start making demands. They start demanding things, or how things are going to go, or having a lot of not just requests, but really demands. And in an effort to try to get the job done, and if a job is a relationship, it's not a job. The job done in a relationship, that's not it. So if you've ever known somebody who tends to be bossy, they might be controller. They might have controller persona, controller in them. Controllers also make things difficult for other people. If someone fills up the space of a room and takes charge, there's not a lot of room left for others. There's not a lot of air left. There's not a lot of movement left. Does that make sense? Am I tracking? And Angelique, you said that you have a controller in you. Would you mind sharing a little bit about that?
I think it's sort of like, you know, actually, I'm not a controller, I think, in a lot of like business or something, but I think in relationships, when I'm triggered, I sort of become, because I have like, I have panic attacks and things like that. And, you know, so I've been studying all these different techniques for the whole of my life just to understand why I get triggered so much. And not knowing that it was as easy as doing the havening techniques, because I think this is a havening technique, and really understanding how my brain functions at a day-to-day level without having to meditate. And so basically my whole life, if I go into these panic attacks, then I have this archetype that shows up, which is like, I need to control the situation, I need to take charge. And I need to tell people what to do. And if they don't do it, then it's my way or the highway. And so, you know, that's why a lot of my relationships didn't really work out, because I would always attract these really powerful men. And of course, they wouldn't allow this to happen. And so you couldn't control these men. And I couldn't control my hypervigilance. So it wasn't safe to be in relationships until, you know, I'm working on it. But I think this is why, you know, it's like there's a lot of us that get affected in different ways. And I think I know of quite a few people in our community, a lot of the hyperachiever women, they have a lot of controller in them. And I think that is also why a lot of us are single. And I have to be really honest. I think as a woman with a controller archetype, you tend to be, you know, the softer, beautiful parts of us don't really come to the fore. And a controller doesn't like to be out of control and doesn't like to be vulnerable, right? And then, of course, being in a relationship is what we would see as completely being vulnerable. And so we'd rather not be in one. And this is why it's so important. Do we really let these controllers run the show, right? Probably if you want to be single for the rest of your life, yes. But if not, we need to understand why the controller shows up in that way. Yeah. And
the controller, so people with controller in them, so you aren't a controller, you aren't the thing, it's part of your mindset. It's part of like what shows up for you. So people who have the controller in them might, most often are afraid of vulnerability. Scared to death of showing what's the whole part of themselves, of opening themselves up. They also might have been betrayed or felt like a fool in the past, and they will do anything they can to avoid that, Ellen's word, to avoid feeling like a fool or being betrayed. So they become very controlling in an atmosphere. And it's really just a way of calming an internal chaos. It's just, and each of the saboteur mindsets, they make a promise that they're going to bring you something and they don't. The controller says it's going to bring you control, and it does the exact opposite, because you can't control people. We can't control relationships. And so each of the promises that a saboteur has, even the judge says, if I tell you what's wrong with you, you'll get better at it. No, no, you won't. If I tell you what's wrong with other people, then they won't surprise you. No, that's not true either. Or if I tell you what's wrong with other people, you'll connect to them better. What? That doesn't even make sense, Judge. So each of the saboteurs has this like, hey, this is what's going to happen if you use me. The avoider says, all the conflict will go away if I just avoid it. All conflict will leave. Everything will be fine. Guess what? It's not fine. And it's not fun because you avoided everything. So each saboteur has its own little push-pull game. Hey, you're going to get this. No, you're not.
I just wanna remind people, if you want to ask a question, please feel free to unmute yourself, put it in the chat, because I don't know who's coming in. I actually disabled the ability for you to unmute yourself, but you can raise your hand and put in the chat, and I'll unmute you. But I really also want to say that when I was reading the book Positive Intelligence, you know, we didn't make up the saboteurs. The saboteurs are actually linked to brain functions. Specific survivor brain functions. So once you actually have activated some of these brain functions, you know, you will run them automatically and they will respond like within a split second. And that's why it's also universal. And that's why you can say it's universal and timeless, because this is part of the human conditioning. So probably, you know, you'll recognize some of the people in your life when you're listening to all the saboteurs here, and you're thinking, geez, this is interesting. But just know that with awareness, we can actually change it, right? And that's why we're doing all this series of interviews, because this is so important for, you know, just personal happiness and effectiveness, etc. Yeah. Please continue.
I love that. The other piece about this is that while the saboteur mindsets might show up, we can teach them how to atrophy. And what I mean by that is by not using that part of your brain as often, it can become it can atrophy. So a neural pathway, as most of you probably know from neuroscience, a neural pathway is a line in the brain, neurons that fire together, wire together. And if you stop using that particular behavior when you're triggered, you can actually let it start to atrophy. I'm trying to find my slide. When you think about being able to stay in a positive mindset as often as you can, and that's really the key too, is that we can only activate that positive mindset when we realize that we're not being positive, that we are judging, that we are showing up as less than ourselves. And so I want you to think about, when something happens, am I going down the pathway of negativity, or am I allowing my positiveness to shine through? And that's really what this 7-week program is. It's getting you focused, as Indrani said, taking you down that rabbit hole of, look, I do this thing. Here's what happens when I do that thing. Here's what happens when I judge another human being. Angelique, here's what happens when I control a relationship. It does not have an awesome outcome. And being able to track it back is like learning those pieces of yourself that might have been programmed from an early age, so that you can reprogram them. And sorry, I'm looking for, anyway. So I will keep looking for that. But now we are going to talk about the next saboteur, if you're ready. If y'all ready for this? Oh, ready for this? Boom, 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 boom,
Oh,
boom,
gosh.
boom.
A lot of my
hyper-rational.
ex-boyfriends, all my ex-boyfriends, most of them.
Which is interesting. Like, I wonder what it is about you that attracts in hyper-rational.
Opposites attract, I think.
Totally plausible, right?
Yeah.
It absolutely could be. We don't know. It might just be that you enjoy them because they're powerful. And maybe you enjoy a man that feels successful and they are intense. The description of hyper-rational, intense. And they're focusing on processing and learning and growing and taking in all this information. But also, somewhere along the lines, they were told it's not okay to feel. So hyper-rational tends to be a person who does not value feelings or emotions, or struggles to express them. But they can also be very smart. And Angelique, maybe you're, what is that word, saposexual, where you're attracted to
Yes.
intelligence?
Yes.
Hyper-rationals, they love science, facts, data, information. And there's a part of you I know that also loves that too, right?
Yeah.
And so people with a hyper-rational are definitely capable of deep insight. They're very objective, perceptive, objective, great mental concentration. They have expertise in areas. They're explorers, they're adventurers, they're not adventurers, they're inventors. They're very mind-driven, very mentally strong people. But what happens is that they start to think that feelings, let me see if I can adjust this, feelings are irrelevant. Feelings don't matter. Insight is where it's at. Rational mind. Feelings are distracting. You crazy emotional. They seem to think other people are drama. That's drama. No, it's just a feeling. Having a feeling. So most of the time, a hyper-rational is someone who shuts out distraction. And Angelique, you've dated several hyper-rationals. Do you tend to find that these are some of the ways that they will show up?
Completely. That's how yeah. Even if they have warm sides, you know, some of them are really like warm people, hyperachievers, or, you know, some of them could also be pleasers. But the hyper-rational side tends to be the side that tends to, you know, the difficult part when you have to resolve conflicts, because they don't empathize very easily, and very often they don't even understand their own feelings, is what I would say. And they tend to know a lot about things, but not about themselves. Yeah, they don't have a lot of self-knowledge. Yeah.
They are absolutely for oftentimes when someone is dealing, if you're in a relationship with a hyper-rational, they are definitely coming from a place where they don't have a lot of self-information. They are frustrated with others because they find emotionality, what's the word I'm looking for? Messy. It's messy. Feelings are messy. They're also very boundaried, preserving. They feel like, to be safe and avoid chaos or control, a person with a hyper-rational kind of mindset will want to maintain safety in a way. And oftentimes they feel different, alone, and not understood. And I think you're very right when you said they don't tend to introspect. It's because they're very unclear about how to feel. I have a client who was going through this program, and when he was going through this program, he is hyper-rational, like off the charts. And he started realizing how often his girlfriend had asked him how he felt, and he was like, that doesn't matter. It's what I think that matters. And as he was going through the PQ program, as he's going through the 7-week program, he started learning, like a little kid, how to identify a feeling. And I'm talking about, I feel not happy. I mean, it was like basic. I feel not happy. Well, can you go any further than that? I think I feel frustrated. Like, he was really trying to develop this idea of what emotions had. And it's not that hyper-rational has like all the secrets and they just don't use them. They just don't know how to utilize that strength. Does that make sense, Angelique?
I think it's actually even that they really don't know what they really have never really listened to their feelings, you know, because they over intellectualize. And I can definitely be hyper rational as well. I think I was there for many, many years until I trained as an energy healer. And then I realized that I was always trapped in my thinking. So you cannot, I don't blame them, but I think, and hyper rationals are very often rewarded in their schools or in their profession for, you know, for being hyper rational. And so the feelings were never rewarded. And the feelings got, you know, that's why they really have a hard time. A lot of the hyper-rational men have a hard time with female friends or females. But definitely I can also see hyper-rational women having, you know, basically being very successful in corporate life, for instance. But then they have a hard time actually finding men that actually are attracted to hyper-rational women, unless they have a man that thinks that's sexy, but because if you're a hyper-rational woman, the way I see it, you tend to be a bit cold. You tend to be seen as cold.
Absolutely. And just so you can understand, hyper-rational people, and Indrani's question, can hyper-rational people be very sensitive as well? Yes, if you have a hyper-rational part of you mindset, oftentimes it means in childhood that emotions weren't safe. You were hurt, you felt too much, so you shut down that part of your body. You shut down that part of your system, and then begin living from here instead of, because it wasn't safe to feel. That can happen. That's one of the ways someone can be a hyper-rational. They can also live in an environment where there's a great deal of chaos, and that's where they can create the idea that emotions are messy, and to be able to control my environment and stay safe, I'm going to be very boundaried. I'm going to be vigilant. I'm going to be very monitoring my thoughts. And it's a way of, I love that, and Indrani's saying that she recognizes in her husband. I love it when we recognize the saboteur thinking in other people. It's awesome. But for a hyper-rational can be someone who it's not safe to feel. So let's think of it that way. And so for the client that I had that was working through this program, the 7-week program, he was learning, oh, I'm gonna cry. He was learning how safe it is to feel, that feelings aren't bad, that they're not wrong, and that it's safe to feel, and he had to start practicing it. So if you do know hyper-rational people, talk to them about this program, talk to them about, because it can be a gift, but then it can also be a curse, right? Because then you can become, as Angelique said, cold and withdrawn, and women tend to feel too strong and not passionate or emotional. And if that's something that you struggle with, there's nothing wrong with being rational. Hyper-rational is not where you want to go. And I wanted to share, let's see if I can share this. So we were talking earlier about the habit formation, how we form habits. So this is a picture of a dendrite. So dendrites are these little things right here, but an event happens, something happens, and then we have an emotional response to an event. Now, let's say you get surprised in your kitchen, or even for if you have a startle response. You startle, and then you have to decide if you feel good or bad. If you've ever been around children, they'll oftentimes fall down or skin their knee, and then they're like, oh! They're trying to decide, what do I do with this? Is it bad? Am I okay? Same thing happens to us. A thing happens, and then we make it mean something. So any of you have done the landmark form, this is the land of meaning. So this is where we start to attach meaning to something, and we make it bad. We make it negative by going down the synapses that we would consider saboteur brain. Now, this 7-week program that we're talking about, it's 6 weeks plus a bonus week. Really, we focus on developing the mental muscle, the fitness, the mental muscle of that larger sage part of you. And you can start to do that, but yeah, we all have to do it consciously. It is not necessarily unconscious. When we're kids, a thing happens and we're like, oh, okay, whatever, a thing happened. We don't have as much judgment or meaning. But as we grow older, something happens, we make it mean something bad. So what we're trying to do is develop this pathway toward the sage. So then you have a choice, and that's the choice point. Something scary happens, something brings up anxiety. You have the option of going, okay, you can detach from it. You can become a conscious observer of your thoughts, or you can do what are called PQ reps. And these are the simplest ones, just rubbing your fingertips together. Doing this for 10 seconds. So I'm just rubbing these 2 fingertips together with such exquisite attention as to feel the ridges of my fingers. 10 seconds of that will change your brain pathway in that second. Now, other than Ellen, I don't think most people walk around doing this. Ellen started doing it since we've started doing the interviews. But doing this, I'll do this before a meeting, I'll do this before a call, I'll do this before a coaching client. It gets you in that centered sage part of yourself. And that's really where the choice happens. Something happens, an event happens. How do I want to deal with it? Yay. No, nothing.
I think Jan has a question. She says, I am the what is it? Hyper rational. Is this why I'm highly pleasing? Does that make sense? Perhaps because I'm hyper rational, I'm highly pleasing. Does that make sense? I don't know what the question is exactly. Do you understand the question, Theresa?
I do. And Jan, I'm going to say that there is a saboteur that we like to call the pleaser, because that's its name. And let's just go to that one next, since you've brought that out. So, and again, I want to reiterate, there are hundreds of thousands of different ways that you can approach your mindset. What we have done in this program is a synthesis of 5 different levels of psychology and performance science. Shirzad has done 4, and I have an additional one in adrenal science. I'm an expert in adrenaline technology. We have synthesized these down into, these are the 10 major sabotaging mindsets. So instead of running around thinking, oh my God, how am I acting today? What am I doing? Am I right thinking? Am I wrong thinking? Being able to divide your mindset into these 10 different areas can be very easy. It can allow you the grace, and it can allow you, as Ellen was doing earlier, laughing at your saboteur. Yep, I'm an avoider. And you can start laughing at it. So let's talk about the pleaser, Jan, and we'll see if this is more of where you tend to fit.
And I can say our community has a lot of pleasers. Maybe 50% is pleaser.
And look at the slide for pleaser. Here's this guy giving his hearts away, because apparently he has 4 hearts and he's given them all. Here for you. I have heart for you. So the pleaser is the pleaser mindset, or the pleaser personality, or typography, or archetype, whatever you want to call it, it's a part of us, or a part of a person who wants to gain acceptance and affection. And they believe that to do that, they have to help, rescue, please, flatter, take care of, save, fill in the blank. All of the things that you would do for someone else if you thought they needed help, even if they didn't ask for it. And that's where I have struggled in the past. I have done pleasing things in a relationship people didn't even ask for. Hey, I got you groceries. I didn't need them, but thank you. Like, really? What? My way of it, I am a love language acts of service. So I would do services for people who didn't ask. And that was the way that my pleaser would show up. And if we're friends, I'll bring you groceries, because apparently that's what I like to do. Hey, I was shopping. I thought of you. I thought you'd like this cheese. What the? Really? It's so funny. And it's based in, thank you, Ellen, for laughing. It's based in a kindness, but it's also my way of trying to get love. I have my pleaser tends to be lower in my archetypal patterns, but it's there. So what happens is a pleaser will lose sight of their own needs and becomes resentful and a martyr. I am doing all this stuff for you. Why are you not giving back? How are you not? You're a taker. And it's very funny when someone is a giver, and then they yell at people for taking. Do you see the disconnect there? Right. Oh, somebody's pointing at herself. I can see her. Let me stop the share. Oh, you're pointing at yourself. It's Jan. Jan's pointing at herself. You
Shall I unmute you, Jan? Do you want to ask a question? Okay, I'm unmuting you. I'm just asking you to unmute. Yes. Hi, Jan.
Hi.
Yeah, this is seriously my insanity. You just described me in one little capsule, honey. God.
Oh, I love your heart. I love how many hearts you want to give to people.
I have more than 4.
Never heard that, but and let me ask you this: when you have been in relationships, do you find that you end up with people who tend to take a lot and you just give?
Yeah, exactly. I end up with the narcissists. you know, and then they go into that whole control mode, and I'm still giving because, you know, they'll change, or they'll love me more, or they'll, oh God.
Aren't you nice? And again, I want to reiterate that each of these saboteur archetypes comes from a strength. The idea of us giving to others is a great thing. The problem becomes when we give all of our hearts or we give all of our energy, or we overgive and we don't ask for what we need. So let me see. And let me, before you start beating yourself up, because I'm a martial artist and I think beating other things up like bags is great, but beating ourselves up, not so good. So part of the strengths of a pleaser, they're empathic and they're empathetic, right? Loving and giving, tuned in. You get what people know before they even know it. You're intuitive, entirely so self-aware, and high emotional intelligence, off the charts with your feels and your intuitions and your knowingness. The problem begins when, like me, I shop for people who don't need anything or want anything. Or I also, the last man that I dated, my name for him, he had amorphous boundaries. And what I mean by that, every conversation was like this. Well, what do you want to do for dinner? I don't know. What do you want to do for dinner? And that was him. Well, what kind of music do you like? I like your favorite music. It was very difficult because I needed somebody who had better boundaries, but he wanted to please me as a way of communicating that, to get affection back. Does that make sense?
Well, I tell you that it totally makes sense, because in my world, it was like a song would come on the radio and it's like, oh God, I love that song. And someone, or I'd say, oh God, great song, or something like that. Or maybe you want to turn it up and they go, I really don't like this song. It's like, okay.
I don't either.
Then maybe I don't like it either. It's insane. I'm sorry, but it really is.
It is. And I just want to iterate that pleasers get a bad rap because it is based on being kind and loving and caring, but the difference is we think somehow it got tied to, that's what I need to do to be liked and loved, that's what I need to do to be appreciated and seen. It's like a little kid having to do a dog and pony show or a puppet show every time, like for their parents to pay attention to them, or it's like a way of us getting attention. The problem becomes that we stop looking at how to do self-care. Needs, how do I know what I need? I didn't even know I had needs. If everyone else is taken care of first, then I'll figure out what I might want or need.
Or it could be different. It could be like, because I definitely was a pleaser, not just in love, but also in friendships, and maybe probably even in business. And actually what I think, because I was so prone to please, I actually would give up things about myself without people asking, and then also be resentful if they didn't give up things, you know, for me. So it's just so unconscious, all these things.
So I'm curious, and I love, so what Angelique is saying is, this is not an exhaustive list. This is a snapshot. This is an encapsulation. I think Jan said in one little sentence, one encapsulation. So everyone is different. We are as unique as our brain typing. So Angelique, how did that show up for you, please?
So basically, you know, I would, for instance, you know, start to cook for them and start to make breakfast for them, or you know, start to think about the summer house and things like that. Or I would give up my hobbies because I thought they wanted me to next to them. And actually, yeah, I have done things like climb mountains for a man, all because I love them. And then at every mountain I climbed, I wanted to break up with him. I was crying on top of the mountain, every mountaintop.
Laughing, I'm sorry, I'm not laughing at you.
Yeah, no, the poor man. And also, you know, just basically just give up my life for you because you know, that's what you probably want from me. Not even ask, just I so understand this movie, The Runaway Bride, sometimes with Julia Roberts. I'm like, oh my God, that's me. You know, what pancake do you like? Okay, I like that pancake.
Well, that's my favorite pancake. What's your favorite?
Yeah.
And I love these examples. So it's the idea that you have to give parts of yourself away to be acceptable to someone else. And they didn't even ask. I remember when I was younger in my 20s, I used to say, God, I hope I don't date a monster truck guy, because then I was going to have to like monster trucks. And if you're not in the US, you have no idea what I'm talking about. These stupid big trucks with big wheels that drive over other vehicles. And I was always like, God, I hope I don't fall in love with one of those guys, because then I'm going to have to like it. But I learned, as Angelique is saying, I learned also that you don't have to. You don't have to like what someone else. And Andrade also says mothers can also be people pleasers. Absolutely, absolutely. That is an excellent point. Oftentimes, when mothers are trying to take care of their kids, you guys, do you have a saying of helicopter parents in other countries? And so it's an over-involved parent who's trying to take care of everything for their child. And while that is not necessarily a bad thing, it can lead to, let's look at the impact. It leads to a mom who is exhausted, tired, and cannot give anything else because she has given everything. So it leads to burnout for a mom or anyone else. Other people start to depend on you. Angelique's boyfriends would depend on breakfast. Mine would depend on groceries. Angelique and I should hook up. I'll bring you the groceries and you can make them the food. And then we'll climb. I'm not climbing a mountain. I was actually married to a mountain climber, and he said, so I'm going to climb mountains every couple of weeks, a month. Is that a problem? No, but I'm not going with you. I was clear I was not going to climb mountains. So
I wasn't.
It takes some practice. Hey, I would have ended up with a monster trucker if I wasn't careful. So the impact of yourself as a pleaser is that sometimes you can feel controlling by giving to get. And I wrote a whole article on this on a blog, national blog. We can give ourselves to others to get love and acceptance. And that's where it becomes unhealthy. That's where it's not safe, because other people will be driven away by us always giving. We control through the need to give. Sometimes pleasers will control by giving. Jan's nodding her head, so you've been there.
Is there another slide after this? Because when I was studying the pleaser, what really moved me was like boom in my heart. It said that the pleaser doesn't believe her needs matter. So she will earn her value or earn love, earn acceptance, not even love, earn acceptance by giving. Because if she doesn't give, she is not accepted. She's not even valued because she doesn't matter. That's so deep for the pleaser.
So one of the pieces, so a pleaser will oftentimes have thoughts like, I need to put other people in front of me. Let's see, hold on, I'm looking through the slides.
The first thought.
To be a good person. So the pleaser tries to earn acceptance and love, and they don't find themselves worthy. Let's see.
I think it's just one of the last bullet points.
I must earn love. I'm not simply worthy of it. So some of these behaviors became apparent. Some of it is how we came from the factory, like the divine was like, you're going to be this way. Okay, fine. And some of these we learn to cope. And the pleaser believes that to have their own emotional needs met, they have to please others. And they're not worthy of love, just as is. So one of the key places that we focus on in coaching when I work with pleasers is, what does self-love look like to you? So remember I talked about the hyper-rational and how they're starting to learn how to feel feelings? Pleasers, their job is starting to learn what self-care feels like, not on a checklist, but how do I actually feel loved and cared for in myself? What can I do to create that? That's a key area to focus on if you're a pleaser, is starting to learn self-care, but from the inside out. How do I know I have my own back? How do I show myself that I love myself? And that's different for every person. But you get to decide, what does that look like for you? Forget asking a pleaser. Go ahead.
It's a big game changer once you start to understand these different archetypes, because I think people are starting to understand that this is like, because I think the problem is, if you don't understand that there's a sage part of the brain, you just think this is just who I am and I do these tweaks. But actually, if you understand that the way we respond in the survivor brain, working out these 10 archetypes, actually, we're not even accessing the superpower of the sage brain. And those are the parts of the brain that actually need to be taking the lead in the times when we're triggered. Because the pleaser will, either go super resentful or super, thinking they don't matter. And so all these different archetypes have survival patterns that completely miss the target when we're triggered in love and relationships. Yeah.
And empathy is a great skill that a pleaser can often apply to others, but starting to turn it inward. So think about, and Jan, I love that you said you have more than 4 hearts. Think about the visual of the pleaser giving all those hearts away. Well, a pleaser is now like being coached. How do I give those hearts to myself? And what does that look like? So it's learning to have self-empathy. It's learning to value yourself. And you can give, but a sage choice is giving from unconditional places. You're not giving to get anything. You're just the joy of giving. No return, no backsies, no takebacks, just giving. And so that's when a pleaser starts to really grow. And as Angelique has said, that the way that she used to act in a relationship is not how she acts now. And I think that's a really, that's an important message, is that you can shift these patterns. You don't have to be stuck in these patterns, but what we do as a group is we train what the heck the pattern is, because you can't weaken an enemy that you can't see. You can't, an enemy that you can't see has more power over you than you realize.
Yeah.
And that's an important thing to realize, I think.
Can I ask you a quick question about the saboteurs relating in relationship? Because I assume most people have different saboteurs, and then they come into a relationship, the top 3 is different for both of them. Is it possible to I don't know, how does that work? One person is working on the sage brain and the other person isn't? I don't know, do you have anything to say? What do you think about that?
So your job as a human being is to constantly and forever be working on the best part of yourself. What might show up in someone else. So here's one of the things I love that Shirzad talks about. So someone else might be, let's say, at a -10 in their saboteur. So let's say someone else is hyper rational and they're in a -10. Well, you show up in your sage part. You're not going to move them to sage, but you might move them to neutral, or you might move them a few spaces forward. And you guys have all studied the impact of heart math and other brain technology, the impact we can have on each other. When you are living in that best part of yourself, you have a greater impact on someone else. Now, the opposite is true also. Someone else's controller might trigger my hyperachiever, the hyperachiever in me. Someone else's pleaser might, if you're dating a pleaser, then you might also attract in takers, controllers, or hyper-rationals. So we can trigger each other's saboteurs if we're not careful. And that's why learning how to do the reps and getting into that positive part of your brain. And even, so the fMRI studies show that in 6 to 8 weeks, you change the gray matter in your brain. It shows the pathways moving more toward the positive side. And
so it's not like these saboteurs in a relationship, get out.
No. And Angelique and I talked about this as well. I feel like there can also be certain times where, depending on what the trigger is, your pleaser might show up, or your controller might show up, or your hypervigilant, which is the one we're going to talk about next, might show up. So it can kind of also be situational, but becoming aware. And like you said earlier, Ellen, I freaking don't know which saboteur was running the show, but I did not like
That's
it.
true.
And then you can stop doing that thing. Oh, Jan, thank you so much. She says, I love the way you said the pleasing is a way of controlling. Interesting to me as I move from being mostly controller to mostly pleaser. She used to be an air traffic controller. So I'm telling you, we get paid. We get paid for what we're great at. It's just a problem when it becomes a problem. Is now a good time to move back on to the hypervigilant?
Yeah.
Yeah, I know. It's so, and I will honor that this is one of the saboteur archetypes that Angelique enjoys or doesn't enjoy, but has. And so for any of you who want to know what the hypervigilant is, will you share a little bit about how that's shown up for you, Angelique?
Oh my God. So I think every man that was serious about me, because if you're not serious with me, you won't actually really encounter the hypervigilance. But if it got serious, the relationship, I would think, oh my God, now there's a real chance to be a catastrophic thinking scenario. And then I would just be super, super anxious all the time. Like, you know, my friends know this, and definitely the therapists and healers would know this, that I would continuously be in anxiety. And it was so much that, you know, I would even date like coaches, and they would try to like NLP me out of it and send me to the best trainers. Or the last relationship, it showed up again. And it just triggered his behavior to withdraw, to be an avoider, to be hyper-rational, I think. But definitely it made me sabotage the relationship by bringing in the controller, because this part is so helpless that you need to bring in another accomplice saboteur to actually make you safe, because this part does not feel safe. And it can be little things like, you're very busy, and you know, you suddenly, you know, only see me like twice a week instead of like 5 days a week, and suddenly I'm like, oh my God, I'm being abandoned. You know, you better end the relationship before he ends it, because this is not safe. Or, you know, he said he would call you before he would sleep, and then he didn't. You're like not sleeping all night. So being in a relationship is pretty freaking hard when you have this one. So this is why I know a lot about every technique that helps us calm down our nervous system, because I wasn't going to be one of these people that said, I'm not going to be in a relationship just because I have this in my system. I always knew I was going to conquer it. I was going to, you know, crack this code one day. But, and I actually, a lot of people I know, because I know the saboteur, sometimes I ask people, and they will tell me that there are certain triggers that this one comes up. And I say, you know what, this is the hypervigilant, and you need to really look at it, because it will control you. I mean, this is one of the worst ones, I would say, because you actually don't even think clearly. You go into hyper, I'm gonna die mode. And I'm not. And these men loved me. These men completely cared about me. You know, some of them really tried to help me. But I couldn't stay because it was too much. So this is like, you know, so this is why I'm really interested in the brain science, because this is really, really debilitating. It is debilitating.
And I know that we are talking about in relationship, but also in the US specifically, and also worldwide, the pandemic has created hypervigilance for many, many people.
Yes.
And it is a feeling of being constantly on edge, nervous. Everything is a red flag. And in dating, if you think about red flags, he did this or she did that, that's a red flag, that's a red. It's like always looking for what is dangerous. And it's an extraordinary sensitivity to it. It is a very debilitating mindset or saboteur, because you're always looking for what's wrong. It is a constant negative neurobias for what's wrong. And guess what you're going to find, self-fulfilling prophecy, girl?
Even if it's like this tiny, the thing is, you think it's this big. Yeah.
And you're going to find it. So the characteristics for hypervigilant are always being nervous, aware, anxiety ridden, because you're afraid of danger. And really the impact of that, it's a hard way to live. The constant anxiety. Also, there's a crying wolf where a hypervigilant will be nervous about, why don't you talk to me? Why don't you get a hold of me? Where were you last night? You said you would call before you went to sleep. And that constant need of reassurance can be draining on the people around you. It can be almost like, I can't give you what you need. And the other piece is, even if people love you, Angelique, that it's hard for you to feel that love, because you're determining love feels like something safe, but you don't feel safe. Does that make sense?
I definitely didn't feel safe. And these men know this, you know, I'm very honest about these things. So it's not like they didn't try, but I knew I had to heal myself. You know, this is why, you know, the healers around me said, you need to heal this before you can even be in a normal relationship. And that's why I'm so interested in this program. But I didn't know that this was a saboteur. I just thought this was me, Theresa. I just thought there's something fucking wrong with me. Do you know what I mean? And so I did a lot of like, and this is the thing, you know, you can actually go very spiritual. And a lot of us here are very spiritual. So I would think ancestral trauma, you know, my great grandmother and my grandmother and my mother, they were all abandoned. And then this grandfather got killed. You can do a lot of that stuff. And actually, you could just also do the brain science, do the havening technique and say, you know what, this is my saboteur brain. I just need to do this. And so, do you know what I mean? Like, we can go way above board to all these spiritual therapies, but actually, I just need to weaken that signal to you're a danger, you're going to die part of the brain, to actually, how can I train the access to my sage brain? So this is why, you know, I love, you know, we're very spiritual. I will still do the ancestral healing stuff, but I also love the science hack stuff, you know? Yeah.
Hey man, go look at your past lives. It's all good. There's nothing wrong with any of that. Look at your aura.
Records.
Check out your chakra. All of that. But the difference is what we have right now. So we were gifted with this body and this brain. And this is part of our way of tapping into the divine in ourselves and the divine in the world. And when these other sabotaging mindsets come up, we are not able to get there. We can't connect.
And it happens in a split second, right? Because before you know it, this Angelique that knows everything, you know, has done so many trainings. When I'm in this hypervigilant mode, I'm a wounded child. I'm a banded child. Literally, I think, I don't know what my age is, but I'm very young. And this is why this is very scary for the coach that dated me, and he really loved me. He had a lot of compassion.
For the coach that dated me.
No, but he wasn't perturbed. He was Superman. You know, this guy has a YouTube channel and everything, so he was going to save me, right? But but it still didn't work because I didn't feel safe. I didn't care whether he was going to save me because the body wasn't trained to feel safe. And then, so this is the thing. When you're in hypervigilant, there is no relationship that will make you feel safe. You need to make yourself feel safe. We need to train our brain to feel safe. Even if people abandon us, even if people betray, it doesn't matter. We need to feel safe. And that's what I've been learning. So I hope that people are, there's a reason why I chose this life and this body and all of these debilitating things that are happening to me. I just think it's I know a lot of techniques because of that, so that's good. But I also want to stop the search for the healing, it has to stop somewhere. But I think the main insight for me was that I knew that this was just a saboteur, meaning this is a specific neural pathway that I've overtrained, maybe even epigenetically, right? Because definitely they see that in brains, what is in gene expression from Holocaust survivors and things like that. And I think, and this is why I think we need to, God knows what's going to happen with all these children, during this pandemic, like what's going on, what's going to happen to them, thinking about viruses and whatever. So I think the hypervigilant saboteur will be more prominent in a way. You weren't here, Theresa, but during the lockdown, we had this interview with one of the astrologers, Vedic astrologers, and this was going all about all the stuff that was going on in the collective and what astrology has to say about it. But then at that time, I was in quite a few Ubers, and Uber drivers were telling me that a lot of people were having panic attacks. Normal people. Normal people. What is normal? We're just all normal, right? And then the Vedic astrologer was saying, oh, it's Pluto, it's this planet, it's that planet. I mean, either it's these planets or just something going on with us and what's going on here in the outer world. Yeah.
And people are being rewarded for hypervigilance right now. It's like a culture. It is becoming a way. So hyperachiever, especially in the US, has been rewarded. You achieve, you reward, you achieve, you're rewarded. And that's been pretty constant. I don't know how long that's been around, but hypervigilance is now being rewarded. Got to stay safe, got to stay safe, got to make sure you're okay, got to protect yourself. So if you think about it, some of these sabotaging mindsets are getting enculturated, and that's what you were talking about with kids. These kids are growing up with a sense of hypervigilance like it's normal. Like it's normal to stay 6 feet away from people. It's normal to be distanced, that hugs aren't safe anymore.
Yeah.
So that's being enculturated. And I really appreciate your honesty and the vulnerability in you sharing. So I just want to, it's 1:30 here. It's 9:30 there.
I was just going to say, that was my next line.
What was it?
Yeah, I was just going to say, but let's, how many saboteurs do we have left to see?
We have the option of not doing any more saboteurs. We have the option. That's why when we set up this Facebook Live, I was like, 10, you want to go through 10? Oh my goodness gracious, aren't you achievers? We have the victim. Oh my gosh, we have so
Victim
many.
is so important.
We have victim, we have hyperachiever, stickler. Why don't you pick one? Victim, hyperachiever, stickler.
Oh, we have all of them in our community, but all three of them.
Well, and anyone can sign up for the program, and we will do more of this. But this is typically an hour, and we do a very light overview. Angelique is not a light overview kind of person. She really wanted to go into a level of more of understanding, and I honor that for her. But for anybody who's like, damn, that's an hour and a half. I want to honor that too.
What will people get out of this program? So it's not, you don't have to do it for love and relationships. You can do it for business. You can do it for money. You can do it for leadership. You can do it for inventing new things for your business, right? Or product development.
Health and wellness, your fitness, your body, self-love, self-acceptance, your success, money, prosperity. All of these things are affected by which part of your brain is activated when you come upon something challenging or difficult. So every area of your life is impacted, and you don't have to apply it to one area. You don't have to apply this coaching or this teaching to one area. It can just be you as an area. And then you get to see the magic that you create, what you manifest outside of finding that center. This is all about you finding you again. And
the price is really almost ridiculous, right? It's like 6/7 weeks for $250. If you need to, you can pay it in 2 installments. And we actually also get an app for a whole year. And normally you would only get that for $1,000. And we get also Theresa in a group coaching for 1 hour a week, plus a week videos per week. And actually we're learning about all the saboteurs, because it's very hard to say which saboteur you actually will express. So what can we do with the app? I think the app is actually really, it helps you track how many repetitions you do, because I think, I don't know, this is what I know from the book, I think. So maybe you should tell what the app is, what the app does.
The app is a guided way. You get 3 quick guided meditations every day, 3 check-ins, and then you get points. You get to track how many PQ reps you got. You can also meditate, and for every you get 3 PQ reps for every minute you meditate. So the goal is to get up to 100 repetitions a day. And that's a lot if you're just doing the app. So the app has a meditation, a reminder. outlines your saboteurs. Each of your apps will be generated for your saboteurs. So it will have specifics on what you're working on. So for Angelique, it will be achiever and pleaser. Those are the two, and controller. So those will be her focuses. So the app will be guided to helping her. So for me, one of mine today, my guided journeys was, what is the gift? What is the gift in this difficult situation? What is the gift? Think of something you're struggling with right now. Think of something that you didn't like how you handled. What is the gift in that? And so every 3 times that day, I'm looking for the gift in a struggle. So that's my app for the day. The next day, it'll be something different. So you're going to get different focuses based on which saboteurs showed up in your assessment and help you get more into the sage. Some days it's all sage, which I love. Today was like all sage, like what is the gift? And I love it. So it's individually focused, and it helps you keep track, and it helps you stay on track for the 7-week program.
And after those
the Dr. Joe people,
after the
Dr. Joe people who meditate 1.5 hours a day will get a lot of points.
Right?
So
What is
2
that?
hours.
I meditate 20 minutes in the morning, and I get 60 PQ reps. So every day I'm like 60.
Yeah, exactly. Hyperachiever is very happy.
And then you asked the question, Angelique. The app is.
So basically what it does, you just think, oh, these amount of minutes, actually your brain changes because we're doing the reps, we are changing the brain. And this is the whole point. We need to cultivate or actually develop strengthen the neural pathways to the sage brains. But we also need to know what the sage powers are, because we don't even know what it is once we're triggered. We forget all about it because our brain doesn't even take us there. Yeah. So.
And that's the practice of the app. It's to rebuild those neural pathways to that sage part of your brain and that sage part of your life, really. And you bring your life to it. The meditation will ask you, what is one thing you want to focus on today? What is something you have coming up that you feel like you're avoiding? What do you have something that's coming up that you feel anxious about? Let's look at that today. So it's very specific to you. You're bringing your life to it. And then you get the app for a year.
Amazing.
Nice.
Paul, do you have any questions? I'm just trying to figure out what Paul is. I'm just kidding, Paul. We love you. Anyways, so we want to start this program next week. It always starts on a Monday. So we're going to send out the emails and the recordings plus the links to sign up for Theresa course. And you can also, you don't have to be in our pod. You can actually create your own little group. So let's say you have a leadership team, or you have colleagues, or you have a club, or you have your business partners. You do it with them, or you do it with like a new group that Theresa is going to start, So this is, we just think this is an amazing model, and that's why we really wanted to know more about it. Yeah. Thank you so much, Theresa, for all the information.
We love Theresa.
Thank you, guys. And I just want to acknowledge that this was a lot of depthful information. And normally I would just like do a more simplified overview. So this was a lot of in-depth on each of the saboteurs. And I hope that spoke to you, and I hope that you found yourself in some of these. Oh, thank you, Paul. He can't speak now. I'm so glad that you joined us, and please take the assessment and figure out like where might my saboteurs show up. Sometimes they're so insidious that we don't even know that they're in there. And once you figure that out, you can start to become free of them, which I cannot tell you. It's so wonderful. Even when my hyperachiever shows up to tell me I have to get something done, I'm like, yeah, I don't know. Maybe I don't. And I can be like, whatever, hyperachiever, I'll do what I feel is right in my heart. And I don't base my day on it's a good day if I did a lot, or it's a bad day if I didn't. So for all of us, it's about finding that self again. And that's really what the world needs right now.
So Johnny was asking, what does the app do? I think the app allows you to actually measure and keep track of the repetitions, right? Yeah. And I think you can also do these PQ scores as well. the PQ scores. Yeah, so you can actually find out how often you are in the saboteur survivor brain, how often you are in the positive intelligence brain. So yeah, so thank you so much again.
Amazing. Thank you, Theresa.
Thank
Excited
you
for
so
Monday.
much.
I hope
Yeah.
I
more
know. Well, and
people
you're going to
join
get
our
an
call.
email with your video. Your first video will be out Friday. So comes out 1 p.m. Pacific Standard Time US. So Saturday morning, Sunday sometime, you guys can actually start the first video. So.
Oh, amazing. I'm gonna so transform my brain, and I'm going to I'm gonna talk to my other coach. We know him all, Dave Elliott. So I'm gonna go and deep dive into dating world. So I'm gonna be super triggered probably. And yeah, so that means that I can use all the tools and I can discover my pleaser, controller, hyperachiever in a different setting, find out how I can respond differently, show up in a different way.
What a beautiful goal. What a beautiful goal.
Yeah, I'm going to crack this. You know, I have all the tools. That's why we were born. That's why we're testing all the tools and we're just like the live guinea pigs.
It's the lab of our lives, right? We are experimenting on ourselves to figure out, how can I become the peak me? How can I become the best, my highest and best self of this iteration of my soul? That's my prayer.
Ellen and I really believe that we are going to crack it. So we're going to like both be like super happy in love, and we're going to like have overcome everything. And we're going to actually set up a dating matchmaking agency using law of attraction plus science, but also, you know, using the sage powers of the brain, you know? So I think Ellen and I are going to create that. Yeah. One day. Maybe you should be involved, Theresa.
Oh, I love that.
Yeah. Yeah. So
beautiful.
Have a beautiful day. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you, everybody.
Bye.
Lots of love.
Bye.
Everybody.
Thank you.
Bye.